Hello, this is a late review for Ant-Man, which I just saw at a matinee, and I have to say, this is a pretty solid film. The film came in at the second lowest gross that any Marvel Studio film has had, just behind The Incredible Hulk, and that is completely in character for Ant-Man. Mainly because Ant-Man, the character, has always had trouble keeping up to his Avengers peers. When they created the Marvel Universe version of the character Ant-Man, they seemed to take away a lot of what made the character special. Ant-Man was one of the main founders of the Avengers. Ant-Man invented Ultron, and the movies took both those aspects away from him. So all that Ant-Man really had was the creation of Pym particles, which made him grow and shrink, and that's what this movie's all about. Now, what's interesting about that is that they decided to do two Ant-Men. When I heard this, I was kind of nervous because, to me, the original Ant-Man, Hank Pym, will always be the main Ant-Man. When I heard that Michael Douglas was playing him, I was afraid that he was just going to be this old mentor who got killed off early on in the film to make way for the new one. The reason I say that was because Marvel's kind of infamous with how they deal with Hank Pym. But thankfully, the script's really solid, and for the most part, Hank Pym stays throughout the entire movie. There's some suspense near the end whether or not he's going to survive, and I won't ruin if he does or not, but I was happy with what they did with it, and I think that they can make a really strong prequel taking place in like the 1960s or 70s that deals with Hank Pym. There's a lot of mentions of other Marvel movies that were put into this film, and they were done really well. It wasn't bashing over the head like they did with Iron Man 2. These all came in and felt just really well implemented. But then it comes to the new Ant-Man. And the new Ant-Man is Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd. And he does an alright job. But the thing about it was, when I was watching him, he's given it his all, but I'm just thinking that any actor could really be doing the same job that Paul Rudd does. I know a lot of that's not his fault. A lot of that has to go with the director of this. But there was really nothing that identified him as being the essential actor to play Ant-Man. The script was originally written by Edgar Wright, who's known for Shaun of the Dead, and his fingerprints are all over this. When I first started watching the film, I couldn't help but feel that Sean Pegg was just being kept in mind to play Scott Lang, who is the second Ant-Man. When I watched it, I was thinking, you know what, this would be a lot funnier if these guys had British accents and Scott Lang was played by Sean Penn. Because I have a feeling that when Edgar Wright was writing this, he wrote what he knew, and that was the case. He wrote, I'm going to write it for my friends. And even Michael Pena's character, who never even gets a last name, I kept watching him thinking, you know what? This is a role that he wrote for Nick Frost, who played Ed in Shaun of the Dead and is the larger actor in all of those Cornetto trilogy films. And that's where I figured, they were kind of going with it. And if you treat it that way, it's pretty solid. Michael Pena plays the character that works with Scott Lang, though. I forget his first name, but they don't bother giving him a last one, so the name is not that important. He talks a lot. He's a guy who just never shuts up, and he does the Chris Tucker sort of humor, where it's like, I'm going to talk really fast, and I'm just going to keep talking and ad-libbing and talking a lot. Kind of like what I'm doing right now. And it gets old. That's more of a less a nitpick because there's only about 2, maybe 3 times in the movie where that happens. But that was one of the issues I had with it. His dialogue could have been tighter. And I guarantee a character like his is the one that's designed to pop up on another Marvel movie or television show like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Not a big name actor, not a big character, but it connects the film. So expect to see him pop up somewhere else. The issue I had most with his character was that out of nowhere, this guy can just knock people out with one punch, and he becomes just as important in the penultimate heist scene than any of the other characters with little to no build-up. So there was that. The other 2 guys who helped with the heist, they also don't have last names. I think one of them was named Dave. I forget what the other one was named. They didn't need to be in this film at all. They each had like maybe 1-2 funny lines. They both did one thing in the heist that could have been done by someone else. Really, they just seemed like they were added so that they could be brought into a Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. television show or something else to that. As mentioned before, Scott Lang is the main Ant-Man of it. He's pretty good. I liked what they did with the character. It stayed true to the source material, with Scott Lang being an ex-con who gets out of jail and tries to go straight but is forced to steal a suit in order to do things. But the real star of the show is Michael Douglas as Hank Pym. Now, when I first heard that they were making Hank Pym old, I was really worried because, again, there's not a lot that they usually do with older heroes in comics. They're designed to be the mentors who get killed off, like what we've seen in the Star Wars films. That was not the case here. Michael Douglas does a great job portraying Hank Pym, and when I sat back and thought about it as a fanboy, I realized that pretty much all of Hank Pym's main comic book issues could be done if he was an older character. It wouldn't have changed anything about those stories. And they also make Hank Pym a lot sneakier than he is in the comics. He plays around with ants and gets him to do things that you never see him do in the comics. Comics, he's an intelligent guy, but he deals with stuff head on. Michael Douglas Hank Pym? He's a lot sneakier. He'll figure out ways to use ants to his advantage, and he uses misdirection to get things done. And that's honestly an improvement of the character. So my biggest fear turned out to be the best part of the film. Congratulations with Marvel and the writers on that one. That was really well done. The other interesting part about the movie I'll go into is Hope Pym, who is Hank Pym's daughter, and she does not exist in the comics. There's no character like her in any of the comics that I've read. Hank Pym, he was married, but he never had kids. In all the future versions of him, I don't think he ever has a daughter. So having her in there was pretty much a blank check to do whatever they wanted with the character. And what they did was pretty solid. She shows some attractions to someone near the end of the film that I didn't think was deserved. But very solid casting with Evangeline Lilly in the role. And she did really well. I really hope to see her in a future Avengers movie or another Marvel film, because honestly, they need more women in the comics and they need more women in the movies, and she's a good character to put into that. For fans of Ant-Man, you might be concerned that Janet is not in the film. And the thing about that is she kind of is, but they don't have an actress play her. When you look at it and look at Michael Douglas playing Hank Pym and look at how Evangeline Lilly looks, you can tell they want Catherine Zeta-Jones to play Janet. Evangeline Lilly looks like Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I think somewhere I read an article saying that Michael Douglas wanted Catherine Zeta-Jones to play the Wasp. So in the future, if they want her in, I think that's who they're going to play it. But she is in the movie. She's not killed off or anything. They deal with her backstory a bit, and they leave it open for a sequel, or even better, a prequel. The only other real thing left to say about the film is the villain. I forget who plays the villain, but the character is supposed to be a character called Egghead from the comics. I don't think they ever call him Egghead in the film, but he's fairly forgettable. There's nothing special about him. He's just an evil businessman. That's it. And you can tell right early on that this guy's going to be the villain. He does experiments on lambs instead of rats just to make you try and hate him more. He's ruthless, that sort of thing. So that's pretty much with all the characters of the film. The story, the script is very, very solid. Edgar Wright's fingerprints are all over this, and you can absolutely tell. He worked on the script for many years before the Avengers film even came out. And you can tell that there was a lot of thought put into how everything works and the physics on everything. The directing is not as good as I think it would be if Edgar Wright stayed on. He walked off. But the director does a fine job. It's just nothing outstanding like in Captain America Winter Soldier. Or even the first Iron Man, Jon Favreau films. Those directors were much better than this guy. But again, it's a solid film. Nothing to really hate about it. It just doesn't really stand out as being great. But again, this is an Ant-Man film. And as we all know, Ant-Man's about failure. And about not succeeding as well as your competition or your peers. So it stays true to the character even with its lack of success. That said, absolutely go watch this film. If you're a huge Ant-Man fan, this is the film you've been waiting for. If you don't know who Ant-Man is, this is just a really fun heist film that takes place in the Marvel Universe. Check it out, and if you like this, please subscribe to the channels and hit like to let us know if we should make more reviews like this. Okay, take care, true believers.